For 2,000 years, explorers have scoured the globe looking for a city that likely never existed. The search for Atlantis is one of the longest-running ghost hunts in human history. The entire legend traces back to a single source. In 360 BCE, the Greek philosopher Plato wrote down the very first descriptions of Atlantis. Plato's account describes a wealthy utopian civilization built on a specific plan, a central island surrounded by alternating concentric rings of land and water. He also provided coordinates. The text places this ringed city beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar, dropping it squarely into the Atlantic Ocean. Finally, he recorded its violent end. A series of massive earthquakes and floods shattered the island, sinking the entire civilization into the sea in a single day and night. Plato provided details precise enough to map, yet vague enough to fit almost anywhere. This transformed a philosophical allegory into a literal set of directions, triggering a scramble that generated hundreds of competing theories about where the ruins actually lie. By the late 19th century, writers like Ignatius Donnelly took Plato's account at face value. They argued the city was a massive landmass resting in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Look at this vintage French map. Placing a continent here directly satisfies the instruction to look west of the Strait of Gibraltar. Proponents claimed the massive mid-Atlantic ridge was actually the highest remaining peaks of this sunken continent. To test this hypothesis, we have to look at the mechanics of plate tectonics, the geological science that tracks how the Earth's crust moves and fractures over time. This diagram shows what is actually happening at that ridge. The tectonic plates beneath the Atlantic are pulling apart horizontally. Magma rises to fill the gap, creating new ocean floor. The crust is spreading outward. It is not dropping a continent vertically into the abyss. A sunken Atlantic continent matches the ancient text, but it contradicts the laws of geology. Because the ocean floor there is actively expanding, a sudden vertical collapse is a physical impossibility. When oceanographers mapped the Atlantic and ruled out a sunken continent, the search did not end. It simply expanded to the furthest edges of the map. Some theorists proposed crustal displacement, a fringe idea claiming the Earth's outer shell shifted and dragged the lost city out of the temperate zone, burying it beneath the ice of Antarctica. Other searches pivoted to the dense jungles of South America or the shallow reefs of the Caribbean, looking for any evidence of the same sunken ruins. These extreme shifts illustrate how the search persists even when the geography fails. When evidence doesn't fit the map, explorers often bend the science to keep the legend alive. Modern archaeologists have identified a much more plausible origin for the legend, located far away from the Atlantic, back in the Mediterranean Sea on the island of Thera. Around 1600 BCE, this island was home to the Minoans. Excavations at sites like Akrotiri reveal a complex Bronze Age society with multi-story stone buildings and vast storage networks. They possessed immense wealth, a dominant naval fleet, and a vibrant culture. Their profile closely matches the powerful society Plato described. Then, the island experienced one of the most violent volcanic events in human history. The eruption shattered the center of the landmass, sending the entire society into the sea in a matter of hours. What remains today is a massive caldera, a crater miles wide where the center of the island used to be. The physical geography shows a civilization swallowed by the ocean. The Minoans had the wealth, the naval power, and the sudden destruction. They meet nearly every metric laid out in the original text, except they were thousands of miles east of the Atlantic Ocean. The destruction of Thera sent a shockwave through the ancient world. For 1,000 years, Mediterranean sailors passed down stories of a great island power instantly consumed by the sea. Plato likely inherited this distorted historical memory. He took the real, devastating collapse of the Minoans and relocated it to the vast, uncharted Atlantic, using it as a philosophical warning about the dangers of hubris. This creates a paradox. For centuries, explorers have poured fortunes into finding the exact coordinates of a city that was based on real events, but deliberately placed on the wrong map. So why do we continue to look for a place that cannot be found? The desire to find Atlantis forced us to invent modern oceanography. It drove researchers to map the deep ocean floor and unearth dozens of actual forgotten ancient settlements along the way. The search for Atlantis ultimately harnessed our drive to explore the unknown, pushing us to map the deep ocean and reclaim lost chapters of human history